Good morning. So thanks so much. So Marie, we were going to start, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, EduCapital, and what differentiates your fund from others as we jump into this conversation this morning.
Right. Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. So I am Marie. I am investment director at EduCapital, which is EduCapital was the first and is now the largest European fund dedicated to EdTech. We have now 180 million euros and assets under management to invest in, let's say, mostly Series A EdTech companies. And what differentiates us, I would say, first, we are one of the very few VC funds founded and managed by female partners. But, that's good enough to be said. But also, we were the very first fund to dedicate only to EdTech back in 2016 when we started raising the fund, which was pre-pandemic time was something not usual. And also now we are also an impact fund, and in the sense that we only invest in companies that have a social impact, and EdTech by nature has this underlying mission, but we now also have our very fund business model twisted to take that into account, because half of our carried interest, which is how the funds are get their profit, is subject to impact performance targets. So it means that for each and every company of the portfolio, we have a strong focus on measuring how sustainable or impactful the solution is, and so that may be what makes us different to other EdTech funds and to many other VC funds.
And I know you and I talked about this a little bit before, defining sustainable education. What does that mean to you? It's obviously the title of the panel, but what is sustainable education as you see it?
So for us, the very idea of a sustainable EdTech company would be a company that has a great reach, is inclusive, and has measurable learning outcomes. So when we come to reach, when we say reach, it means that it must give access to education to as many as individuals as possible globally. In terms of inclusion, we look at EdTech company that would close the equity gap, but the equity gap can be a gender gap, a racial gap, a social gap, or even a geographical gap. And that's that's what we would call how inclusive we want the company to be. And lastly, and very importantly, and that maybe the most difficult part, is the learning outcome. So we want that the EdTech companies can measure and how efficient the solution is. How does it really maybe help learners be more engaged, or have less school dropouts, or improve your employability, or even give you career opportunities throughout life? Because when we speak about EdTech, of course, it's from early age to K-12, higher education, but also corporate training and lifelong learning.
And you kind of led into what I was going to ask next. I mean, education is this broad thing, right? You can go from early literacy to workforce training to corporate training, right? Development. What are some of the trends that you see there, especially through the sustainable lens that you're seeing and that you're excited about?
All right, so I think one of the greatest trends recently that may be the most visible part of EdTech is the rise of the B2C global platform. Definitely, we saw back in the maybe year 2010s or something, there was the emergence of the MOOCs. Then came maybe the learning apps that were truly global, maybe Preply or Duolingo that we saw emerging. But now maybe for the past, let's say, it started pre-COVID, but it was accelerated with COVID, like the rise of other, like maybe more cohort-based classes, and and the importance of the community back into like, you're not learning by yourself anymore on your app, like the importance of the community and we saw example in the US with maybe on that, but we have great examples in France or in Europe as well. We saw in K-12 companies like Codari helping like the children bring communities and classes for coding learning, or the for in the lifelong learning space, the community-based topics like financial education for women. We recently invested in a company called Female Invest, really putting that this sense of having a space where you meet and share common interest and learn from peers is really important. So this whole cohort base is like a very important trait, I would say, that helps in this B2C space. And also maybe another interesting trend would be like the how maybe user-generated content is helping and it creates a huge network effect, helping this B2C platform becoming really global. And we see it both on the teachers' side as well as the student side. We saw a lot of these tutoring platforms, like where like any tutors can now be a global teacher, and go on those platforms. We in Europe, we all know the success of GoStudent, for example, but there's also the emergence recently of platforms where students themselves start sharing their flashcards or how they and share them with other students. We have this great new company called KnowUnity in Germany doing this, like really, and it's super viral. And this is because also the user-generated content is not only what you see on YouTube. Now you can like comes to the classroom or at least to the education space. So that's maybe one of the great trends I would say we saw recently, and I think that's very helpful for what we were talking about reach. I think like being a real B2C platform is helping like reach more people, and not only like all the first EdTech were more around like either to the classroom and or to maybe parents that could pay for the solutions. Now we see more and more maybe affordable solution in the market.
And I think when we're talking about education, you know, almost every industry has been disrupted over the last few years, but really when we look at the impact that the pandemic had, that COVID, now that we're somewhat hopefully coming out the other side of it, what changes did you start to see and have you seen around EdTech solutions in that, and do you see them continuing? How do you see that transforming education going forward?
Okay, but first, when it comes to EdTech, we cannot deny that COVID was a great booster for EdTech. Pre-COVID, like the EdTech market was about like 175 billion market. Now we project it to reach like maybe 500 billion in 2025, and just last year in 2021, there were around 20 billion invested in EdTech. So we cannot deny that it was a bit like help bring awareness around how technology can disrupt and help education, help foster education and make it maybe even more sustainable. So, but the trends we saw and how it impacted, first, maybe that's the bad news, is that we saw like more and more teachers or caregivers or tutors be a bit overwhelmed with the solutions and don't know how to use them, or because there are too many, and they are a bit like, you know, maybe there's a space for like, or need for like teaching the teachers how to use these new tools. There are also, and that a bit comes with it, is like we also hear from the ground that they also would like to be trained on like the 21st century skills we all speak about, like whether it be soft skills, coding, and they feel they need to also be more literate around all these topics, and also how to use in the classroom or these new technologies. So that would be like, we kind of discovered it, and it also created a gap between like maybe a younger generation able to like maybe take these tools, and another generation that maybe would need to be more trained around that. That would be like, and so we see more and more maybe tech companies helping the teachers more than the student, and that's great news because there were lack around that. Also good news is that the parents are maybe more now aware and willing to spend at least money and attention on how to help or be more active in the education of their children at home. We saw that, like, you know, they're more aware of what their children are really learning at school, because now they had to help even more, not only on the homework but on everything. And now they want to play maybe a more active part in it, and so they are questioning the way things were taught, and like the whole emergence of like more project-based rather than pure content or pure knowledge, maybe more like new skills. All of this is also now something parents are more involved and more, and so we saw new B2C companies also raising, because parents are, you know, COVID helped them discover all that. And so that's maybe the two major trends. I was thinking maybe another one, but I lost it.
No, well, you know, and I want to ask another question before we try and turn it over, if we have time, to the audience. But, you know, we're talking about talent, right? And you mentioned earlier too, sustainability, including equity, and I know tech obviously has a long way to go, you know, when it comes to equity and improving that. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you see the role education playing, and kind of playing a new role in empowering that next generation and a better equitable?
So regarding this, we definitely saw companies being helping, like in terms of equity. So when it comes to access to education, definitely, if you can bring content or bring knowledge, like give this access for free or lower cost than it used to be, definitely. And education, edtech help to scale and create content at lower price. So in terms of how it helps, like maybe communities that were underserved or didn't have access to this content, definitely there's more and more around it. When it comes to gender gap, definitely we saw like in tech especially, or let's say tech-related or mathematics, and there's something around like in the classroom or maybe during the curriculum, girls are less pushed toward these type of topics. But when it's embedded in maybe a game, or maybe that would be like some extra curriculum activities, we saw that in the demographics of the users, we saw definitely a higher percentage of girls using maybe K-12 math or science-related apps or solutions. And in terms of geography, we also see the more and more companies that target communities maybe in Latin America, or in we saw a lot of companies here in Spain trying to reach more Latin America with you know, after schools type of offering, because you know the school was disrupting a lot during COVID, and many schools did not reopen, and children were taking to the next grade, but in fact that never been to schools. And we saw more and more like companies trying to say, okay, let's address this population with like an app or something that could be, you know, on top of school.
So, and we wanted to see, are there any questions that anyone here has?
You were talking about community, and I think that's a great idea about the peer-to-peer sharing. But as a mother, we're always telling our kids, don't talk to strangers on the internet. And so how do you moderate that peer-to-peer sharing to, first of all, make sure they're appropriate people? And then also, having raised 4 children, sometimes the content they share might not be what you would want them to share. So how do you make sure it's actually educational and not all about Fortnite or who I really can't stand in my class?
That's a very good question, and that's always a bit challenging. Okay, of course, when we talk about EdTech, we're not only talking about K-12, so a lot of the community is also easier when it's lifelong learning, where people self-regulate themselves. But in K-12, the few examples we have is definitely it's only from maybe the age of 10 or 10, 12 that comes to be really relevant. Before, of course, it's harder because you need a community manager that would be in this. But to be honest, when it's not relevant or not appropriate, it's like the social virtual circle. Like some in some of the maybe the Discord rooms that they have and all of this, people just get kicked out quite easily by the kids themselves when it's out of like not in the it's not the right place. They quite know where they should be when it's about doing your homework or just speak about your last Fortnite games. But still you need it's a challenge for K-12. But today, in the few companies we've seen, it was quite well managed so far because everything which is community driven is if you feel like people feel it's not the right place, it will kill the whole purpose. So people want to preserve this safe space they have.
We have time for maybe one more. Yeah.
Thank you for this talk. In your opinion, what are the most successful approaches for online education, like cohort-based or self-paced?
That's a hard question. I think there's not one. It's not one against the other. It's more regarding what kind of topics you are tackling. Maybe for lifelong learning, self-paced is easier because you can let a kid in front of a computer. But even for lifelong learning, we think to keep it engaging, you cannot be 100% self-paced. So we think it should always be a mix. But then there's also what topic you're tackling. Like when you're doing math, it's not like doing coding. Doing languages is not like doing soft skills. So I would say to be really to be black and white, I would say when it comes to kids, you should maybe be more cohort-based because you need to be more engaged. When it comes to hard skills, maybe it's easier on self-paced, but still, we saw more and more maybe even for hard skills, you need to be we saw AI bots or teachers trying to keep it a bit conversational. So even if you are self-paced, now technology helps you to make it look like a course and have maybe a bot talking to you or personalized a breakdown, different type of formats, like from a quiz to a video, and keep it engaging. So I think it's not once again the others. It has to be a mix of both of them, but some are more appropriate given the audience.
Cambridge, UK.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much. Thanks for everyone coming. Thank you, Marie, and
Thank you
have
all.
a great rest of the day.